Hi folks, Toad here with VisorDown.com, and we are in for a little bit of a different review today because there's a certain coronavirus, what some people are calling the lockdown, has come into force, and we're no longer really allowed to go hooning around the countryside on these things. So instead of doing this piece to camera in a nice secluded country spot somewhere, I'm having to do it outside of my house, which is a little bit different. So another reason that we're having to do this in the UK is obviously because any foreign launches had to be cancelled to sort of stem the spread of coronavirus. So Ducati have basically got one example that's been doing the rounds through the hands of a few different journalists in the last few days. And yeah, here we are, and Vice Down have got to have a go on it. So what is it? Well, this is the V4S version of the Street Fighter. So this is 19795, and the S version over the standard V4 gets lightweight Mazda wheels. It's got the Öhlins EC electronically controlled suspension system. It's 2 kilogram lighter, which is mainly all down to the lighter wheels. I suspect the actual Öhlins suspension system actually adds a little bit of weight to that. Everybody knows everything about this bike already. It's been the worst kept secret in motorcycling, and it is effectively a Panigale V4 or V4S with the fairings removed. So the engine is the same engine. It's got 208 horsepower in this version, and that comes in at 12,750 RPM. The engine, if you don't know, it's massively over square. So the 81mm bore, and it's got a 53.3mm stroke. So it revs like anything. It's absolutely nuts once you get it into the power band. I'll come on to that in a little while. We've got a ride-by-wire throttle, which is fairly good. It's not a super smooth one, but it is effectively a race bike with the fairings removed, or a sports bike with the fairings removed. So the throttle can seem to be, especially if you're riding around town, it is a little bit on-off in just the initial part of the opening of the throttle, which made riding it today feel a little bit clumsy. This bike has also got a slightly loose chain, which is because it hasn't been back to Ducati. It's just been passed around all the journalists, and I think someone's been having a bit too much fun on it, and that hasn't helped the situation. 6-speed box, obviously, with a quick shifter as standard on the V4S, and the gear change on it is a little bit it's not the most direct gear change that you're ever going to use. There's no defining sort of snick or click as you engage the next gear, whether you're going up or down the box. And I did have a couple of it's a Ducati after all, so you can never find neutral, but there was a couple of times where I was going down the box and it was clicking into neutral as opposed to going into first. But it is a brand new bike. This has only got a few hundred miles on it, so maybe it just needs bedding in. I'm not too sure. I never had those problems with the Panigale V4S that we tested last year, and this is effectively the same bike, so you'd have to assume that it's maybe just that it's a little bit newer, or maybe it's just been a little bit abused by the previous journalists. Thank you very much for that. I've been out on the bike, so I took it out last night, and it's actually getting collected because the Ducati dealerships are closing, so they need the bike. Ducati's HQ is closed, so the bike needs to go back to a dealership to be safely stored. So I've had a decent day yesterday riding the bike, and haven't been out on it today, just that I get this filming done. But it is phenomenally quick. The Panigale is a fast bike, a really fast bike, and you take the fairings off it and you put some wide bars on it, and it kind of just condenses that feeling of speed. It just feels so much more urgent and so much more eager and so much more melt your face fast. But the one thing about it is that it kind of all happens, like the bike sort of comes alive at this fun zone once you get past about 7,000 or 8,000 RPM. But in any one of the first 3 gears, you're already going to be doing over 100 miles an hour at that point. So it kind of makes you wonder where you can exploit this bike to its fullest. And you're going to say you're going to take it to a track. Well, wouldn't you buy a track bike for that? You know, a bike with fairings, a sports bike with clip-ons that you can get behind a screen. Nakeds are fun on track, and you know, I love a naked bike, but when it only starts to feel like it's getting going at 8,000 RPM or 7,500 RPM, it kind of makes you wonder, how can you exploit it all on the road? And if you have to take it to a track, I'd buy a V4S Panigale or a V4 Panigale just because it's built for purpose. Now, I'm just going to go through the equipment on the bike. So I've already talked about the quick shifter. This bike has got the same dash and user interface as the V4 Panigale, so it's got the same sort of riding mode selection, how you change the riding modes. The EC Öhlins electronic suspension on it is fully adaptable and adjustable all through there, so there's no buttons or knobs to twiddle. It all happens through the dash. It has got quite a good interface with regards to that. Tuning suspension or setting it up for yourself can be quite a daunting prospect. But what Ducati have done, they've given it such an interface that you can kind of just interact with the dash in a certain way to get the bike to sort of handle the way that you want. And I do quite like it. It's good. I had it on a 1260 Multistrada S that I had as a long termer a couple of years ago, and it's the same interface, and it does make it really, really easy to sort of tune the suspension to your needs, whether you've got a passenger or whatever, or what sort of riding you're doing. So that's quite cool. There's one bit of kit on the bike that kind of lets it down in my eyes, and that's the tyres. They've got Pirelli Diablo Rosso 2 hoops on it, which when you've got, I mean, Ducati are basically best friends with Pirelli, but when you've got all of the tyres that Pirelli could offer for this bike, I wouldn't choose Rosso 2s. They just seem like a bit of an odd choice. It's like going to a really, really high level dancing competition wearing Doc Martens. They're not bad, don't get me wrong, and 99% of the time you're never going to get near to the edge of what the tyres can offer and what they can actually do. But it did sort of seem a little bit weird when I heard it had got Rosso 2s on it. I thought somebody was joking, or they'd just got muddled up, but no, it definitely has got Rosso 2s. And the first thing I'd do is just ditch them, and if you were only going to ride it in warm weather and on sunny days like today, you'd just get a set of super coursers and stick them on it, and it completely transformed the bike. Just going to talk about the braking setup, and again it's kind of going over the old ground of this bike because it's the same Brembo style EMA caliper setup that are on the latest V4S. It's all IMU controlled, 6-axis, and the brakes they're pretty good. They're really, really strong. But the V4S, which I'm going to keep comparing it to because it's the closest thing that we've ridden recently to this bike, and that's not the latest version of the V4S, that was the previous one without the winglets. The brakes on that felt sharper, and these don't quite feel as sharp. I don't know if they've done something, maybe using a different pad. There's loads of bite and there's plenty of feel, but you don't get that initial bite when you first start to pull the lever, and you did with the Panigale. And it was a little bit more comforting just to feel the front end bite and the forks dive and the front wheel dig into the tarmac a little bit. And you don't get that with this. It's more of I guess it's more set up for road riding and general road riding. But yeah, it's just a slightly different experience and a slightly different feeling that you get through the lever and through the forks and through the front brake as you press it. What do we like about the Streetfighter V4S? I mean, the engine's bonkers. You can't not like something that is that bonkers, and that MotoGP soundtrack that you get when you get the thing on the pipe it's really sublime, and you can hear it for miles around, especially when there's no cars on the road, which isn't very good. I also quite enjoy Öhlins EC electronic suspension system that they've got. It's really, really well set up, and even a bike that's sort of as hard edged as this, it just, if you're riding it slowly or around town, it doesn't feel jarring. And the old, the Panigale V4S is quite a comfy bike to ride, and the suspension on it is really, really plush, and this has carried over to this. So what don't we like about the V4S? The tyres are the obvious one for me. It's just a really odd combination to get a bike that's got over 200 horsepower and is so closely related to a superbike or a sports bike that can lap race tracks at phenomenal speeds, and this can probably lap them within tenths of a second off what the Panigale V4S can. It just seems a bit of an odd decision to give it these hoops, which it's not like they're substandard, but there were better options in the Pirelli range for this bike. So yeah, the other thing that it's not that I don't like it, it's a little bit frustrating, is that the way the bike's set up and the way the whole kind of feel of it is, it just feels like it really comes into its own when you're going really, really quickly, and by the point that you're going to the speed that this thing starts to become fun, you're kind of already at that stage where you're about to lose your driving license, which isn't what any of us want, really. Like I said, the buzz around this bike has been building and building and building for so long. It's almost like nobody really needs to review it, because I don't think Ducati are going to struggle selling them once we are allowed into their dealerships to put deposits down and so on and so forth. But I get it. Nakeds are fun, 200 horsepower nakeds are fun, but there's just something about the way that it's tuned that it just kind of baffles me. Would I own a Ducati Streetfighter V4S? Do you know at 19k you could get the base model Panigale V4? I think I'd probably rather have that. I'd rather have something that is sporty, it's got the fairings, and it's prettier. I mean, this is not a pretty bike. It looks eye-catching and it's it's brutal looking, but yeah, if I was going to buy one and spend 20k on a motorcycle, I think I'd probably get a Panigale V4 or an R1M. Anyway, there's going to be a full review on visordown.com. Thanks folks.